I said goodnight to my bro, and he vanished. Not the kind of vanishing where a car skids off a road. The other kind. The kind where the person is still walking the earth, posting online, living their life. But the man you knew is just gone. The phone doesn't ring. The texts are just your own, sitting there in blue bubbles like messages left on a deserted island. You check your signal. You wonder if you said something wrong, but it was just goodnight. How can goodnight be the last word? It's the word you say before see you tomorrow. It's a promise, until it isn't. Until it becomes a tombstone for a friendship you thought was built on concrete. This isn't a story about a fight. This is a story about a ghosting, and it leaves a colder kind of hurt. The first week, I made excuses for him. He's busy, work is crazy, maybe his phone broke. I was a master architect building reasons, each one shakier than the last. By the third week, the anxiety set in. It was a low hum in my blood. I'd pick up my phone 100 times a day. I'd scroll back through our last conversations, analyzing every word, every emoji, looking for a crack I'd missed. Did I offend him? Was my joke that last night too harsh? Did I take too much without giving back? The silence was a blank screen, and I was projecting every one of my own insecurities onto it. I replayed every memory, every laugh, every time we had each other's backs. It all felt so real. How could something that felt so solid just evaporate? I felt stupid. I felt naive for believing in the bond. The quiet was deafening, and in that deafening quiet, the only voice I could hear was my own, asking one question on a loop. What did I do? The shame started to creep in. Maybe I wasn't a good enough friend. Maybe I was too needy, too loud, too quiet, too much. I started to shrink inside myself, afraid that if this could happen with him, it could happen with anyone. I was living in a ghost town of my own making, and the only ghost was the echo of a friendship I could no longer touch. The first realization hits you like a bucket of cold water. It wasn't a single thing. There was no smoking gun. I was looking for a battle, but there was no war. There was no dramatic explosion. It was a slow leak, a tire going flat over months. You don't notice it until you're already on the rim, unable to move. The energy had been shifting. The calls became less frequent. The hangouts were harder to schedule. The conversation stayed on the surface. Sports, work, trivial things. The deep stuff, the real stuff that had all dried up. And I'd been too busy or too comfortable to see the water was gone. You start to understand the ledger. It's not a cruel thing. It's a human thing. Every relationship has a silent balance sheet. On one side is the value, the laughter, the support, the good times. On the other is the cost, the energy, the time, the emotional drain. For a long time, our ledger was deep in the green, but somewhere, somehow, it tipped into the red. Maybe I was taking more than I gave. Maybe he was. Maybe our lives just grew in different directions, and the cost of bridging that gap became too high. He didn't wake up one day and decide to hate me. He just stopped making the deposit. He let the account go dormant. The good night was just the day the bank closed for good. This is the hardest pill to swallow. The bond I was mourning, it wasn't the bond we actually had at the end. I was mourning the memory, the ghost of what it used to be. I was holding a funeral for a man who had already left the room months ago. I was in love with a photograph, not the person. The friendship had already become a museum piece, and I was the only one still visiting, still polishing the glass cases, wondering why no one else was there. There's a primitive logic to it. In another time, men were a unit, a tribe. Survival depended on it. If someone became a liability, if they slowed the group down, the tribe had to move on. It was a brutal, silent calculus. This feels like that. A silent banishment. No discussion, no conflict. Just the quiet, cold decision that the unit is stronger or better off, moving forward without you. It's not personal. It's survival. It just happens in a world of smartphones and social media now, instead of a forest. The silence itself is the message. For so long I kept waiting for a letter, a text, a call that would explain everything. I thought the silence was the absence of a message. It took me a long time to understand. The silence was the message. It was the only one he was willing to send. It said, "You are no longer a priority. This is no longer worth my energy." Once you hear that message, truly hear it, You can stop listening for another one. The waiting is over. This forces you to look inward. It forces a brutal honesty. Was I a good friend? Was I present? Did I add value, or was I just a fixture? It's not about blaming yourself. It's about an audit, a personal inventory. You have to ask the hard questions of your own reflection because he's not there to answer them for you. This is where the real growth is buried, under the pain. You have to dig for it. The pain doesn't disappear, but it does change. It stops being a sharp, screaming thing in the middle of the night. It becomes a quiet scar, a piece of history written on your skin. It teaches you. It forges you. You learn to value your own peace above the noise of someone else's absence. You learn to stand on your own, to be your own anchor. You stop seeking external validation for bonds that should be built on mutual respect. You become more selective with your energy because you learn it is the most valuable currency you have. You don't build walls, you just raise your standards. You look for brothers who are builders, not ghosts. Men who are present, who communicate, who understand that a bond is a living thing that needs to be fed by both people. You learn to see the slow leaks in other relationships, and you either choose to fix them or you choose to let the air out with intention, not neglect. You become stronger, not harder, more aware, not more afraid. You understand that some people are for a season, and their departure is not a tragedy but the end of a chapter. It makes you appreciate the ones who stay, the ones who show up, with a ferocity you never had before. You realize your circle might get smaller, but it becomes unbreakable. Your mission becomes your focus. Your growth becomes your goal. And you understand that a true brother wouldn't have let you stand in the silence alone. He would have fought with you or for you, or at the very least he would have had the respect to tell you he was leaving. I said goodnight to my bro, and he vanished. But in that emptiness, I found a stronger version of myself. I found the man who didn't need the ghost to confirm he was still alive. If this journey through the silence resonates with you, if you've ever stood on that deserted island, then you know this conversation matters. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. Let's build a different kind of circle right here. If this helped you, pay it forward. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more raw truths. We're in this together.